Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reclaim Leader. Back again with Jesse. We are in Lent. Things are rolling along, cruising along as they often do this time of year. Tons of things to think about, to do, but also we want to make sure that we are thinking about some of these areas of ministry that we want to make sure we're intentional about. We talked last week about guest services leading up to Easter. We're still talking about it.
Yeah, before we hit record, constant vigilance. It's one that you just can't take your eye off of, right?
Yeah, you just constantly, because you're dealing with volunteers, and volunteers make all sorts of decisions, and especially if you're empowering your volunteers.
That's right.
Like Suzanne had mentioned last week, when you're empowering your volunteers, sometimes they're going to make decisions that aren't great, and then you're going to have to deal with it. But I think it's much better to have that sort of trust.
It's the best thing you can do for a volunteer and the worst thing you can do for a volunteer. I mean, it's just like, it's awesome when it's working well. So we're kind of diving into some areas, just practical things, like how do you create a great experience for guests and help them feel connected, and the guest services idea, and kind of talk and shop around that. And we're going to hit on a topic that we visit pretty often. We're going to be talking about groups, small groups, community groups, whatever you kind of call them in your church, or maybe you don't really have groups and you're like, I know we want something like this. What would this look like? And so we're going to just be talking through Jason and I and our approaches to groups in our churches. And I've kind of categorized this in really broad terms, Jason, but 5 key decisions that for us have led to better groups and a more predictable, healthy way to go about creating new groups and those kinds of things. And so we're just going to walk through it, and we'll chime in on these topics and kind of talk about what we do, and your approach may look different. But these are 5 decisions that I think will help you around your group strategy. If you kind of go, okay, I'm checking these things off, and whatever you decide about them, you're going to at least have an answer to that question, so you can kind of be set up for success. So I know groups are a big deal at Tower Hill, Jason, and you guys really placed an emphasis on this starting, I don't know, probably 10 years ago or so, right?
Yeah, that's when we started. I mean, we call them relational missional spheres. We don't, no, I'm just kidding. No.
All right, turn it off right now. Please don't call them relational and missional spheres.
Sorry, it's the Presbyterian in me. But yeah, groups is something that we started from scratch when 10 years ago, or now, well, really 12 and a half years ago.
Sure.
All we had was, we had a couple of Bible studies here and there. I always call them the old man Bible studies, the ones like retired guys who were getting up at like 6 a.m. to do a Bible study. It's real tough to catch working folks. We had women's circles, but by the time I got here, they were declining in attendance and interest. So if I had to tally them all up, I would say maybe we had probably like 50 people on a list who were involved in some sort of thing like that, which isn't bad, but we knew that if we were going to disciple people as we were growing, we had to figure out, how do we get them to come to a thing where they're going to make some spiritual friendships and get some content and get connected in the life of the church. And that's when we started really thinking about groups.
Yeah. So groups is really a way to take a larger community and make it smaller, more intimate, closer in, so that life on life, growing in faith together and being a community together can happen. And even where increasingly over time, your care for each other can happen in the context of groups. And there's lots of good reasons to have groups. And for us, our journey is a little different. We had historically had lots of groups, but they had kind of become legacy groups, life groups that have been together for 20 years, 25 years, kind of closed groups. And so we had some fits and starts of starting new groups, and then they would kind of fizzle out or stick around, but we didn't have like a really cohesive group strategy the way that we needed to. And so we started making some decisions a handful of years ago that just to kind of get a little bit more clarity around what are we trying to do with groups, but also what's that going to look like in the life of the church so that it's predictable and replicable and the things that are going to set that strategy up for success long term. So these are 5 decisions, and you can relate to these, Jason's. But our first one is, if you're going to have groups, decide on a group's calendar. Decide on a group's calendar. This is, for us, was an important one. So if you have, for us, it's more seasonal groups. So our groups meet in the fall, the winter, and the spring, and kind of have summers off. We do 10 weeks in the fall, 10 weeks in the winter, 10 weeks in the spring. And it kind of creates a rhythm for our groups where people know that if they miss the fall, there's an opportunity coming up in winter, there's in the spring, or maybe they did the fall and the winter, and they're like, in the spring, we're just not going to be able to do a group. So it creates a rhythm of expectation of these seasonal groups where people can come into groups, can step out of groups. And then what happens inevitably is sometimes those groups actually take on a life of their own, and people are hanging out outside of those groups, and they become kind of their own deal. So, we don't hold this too tightly, but we just said, if we make a decision on a calendar for groups, this is going to give us a rhythm for signing people up, training leaders, celebrating what God's doing in groups, and some other kinds of things around that. So that's our seasonal approach, is 10 weeks in the fall, winter, and spring, and kind of summers off. And that's what's been working for us. That was our decision. So, but what about for you guys? What's the rhythm of groups look like?
It's so funny. It's so funny. It's exactly the same.
So maybe we stole it from you. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I think for everybody, it's all like trial and error. And we tried all sorts of different things. And that's the thing that seems to work, is to have a designated amount of time. And we are experimenting with some life groups and things like that. But really, the way that we do it is just that way. It's, how do we create seasonal on-ramps? Because people will come to your church all for different reasons at different times of the year. How do we try to catch them and get them involved in a new group? So that's something that we do.
Yeah. And so we're looking at, our winter groups are wrapping up here at the end of March, and our spring groups will start right after Easter. So we go, there's an on-ramp right into the post-Easter. It's an invitation point, and we kind of create a rhythm around that. And we'll talk a little bit about leader training later, but this also creates a rhythm for new leaders to be deployed. So you kind of, toward the end of that season, you say, hey, is there anybody in this group or in your group that would be a potential leader for another group if you're going to kind of grow your group's footprint? So decide on your group's calendar. And I don't know, Jason, what do you do with rogue groups? If there's a group that's like, now we're a life group and we're going to meet forever, do you just let them do it? Or what do you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of do, and we just like build around them. I don't know that I want to. I don't know if it's worth it to come in and all of the bad blood that would create to try to just break that up. Mm-hmm. We'll talk to them, be like, hey, we'd love it if you would consider doing this, but if they dig their heels in, it's just okay. Well, I hope.
I hope that thing, right?
You're learning about Jesus,
Hopefully, right. Yeah, and so there is that sense of sometimes you got to create space for people to do their thing, and some groups may function more like a life group that meets on an ongoing way, and they love hanging out and spending time together and doing things outside of group.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, or you'll get, and maybe you're gonna talk about this, but you get a short-term group that decides they want to keep meeting.
Yeah, it's typically how it goes. Yeah, right? It's a short-term group that says we're like a family, we're going to keep this thing going. And I don't know, we've talked a lot about the cell group model. Do you divide groups and split? Our strategy has been more to use the seasonal calendar approach to create new groups, and sometimes to take leaders out of a group and deploy them in a new way, but not so much the divide model so much. So I don't know what your approach has been.
Everywhere I've ever been, I've always started thinking, oh, maybe we should do the cell model, because I don't know. It
makes sense on some level.
It makes a lot of sense. It's very logical, but I've never been able to make it practically work. And every time I even mention it, people are so allergic to the idea.
Yeah. Well, and I think, when you're thinking in terms of seasonal groups where there's in the fall, winter, and spring, there's an opportunity to join a group, that really launching new groups with new people is a great strategy for replication over saying to friends that have enjoyed being in group together, now you have to break up and go be somewhere else, right? That's already hard.
Yeah. And the friends will find each other. The friends will find each other. So
they will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So decide on your calendar and then reverse engineer your sign up process from there, right? So how many weeks do we want to give to signing up for new groups before they begin? Sometimes it's 4 weeks ish for us. In this next round, as Easter, and there's so much going around spring break and Easter, we're going to give it like 5 or 6 weeks of kind of heads up, just because we know we're going to miss some weeks with people, and we want to make sure to create a lot of space for that. So you can kind of reverse engineer from there. And that off ramp for someone, they got through the winter group, they enjoyed it. Now they need to take, the spring off, but they're going to be back for the fall. So decide on your calendar. That's the first decision. The second one, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was just going to say that's a really excellent point that might get missed, is that if you have a regular rhythm for your groups, then somebody doesn't have to wonder, when's my next, if I can't do it this time, when am I going to be able to do it again? No. I know there's another round in the fall.
That's right.
It
and
really
it's creating permission. I mean, think about it. Is there anything worse? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things worse. So let me change that. It's not so good when we just had this happen in the fall. So I lead a Sunday evening community group, and we had a couple sign up that Sunday nights really didn't work for them, but they wanted to be in the group. And every week I would get an email from them that said, "Hey, we're not able to make it this week." And after about the 4th week, she finally just said, "Can you just take us off the email list? Because I feel bad every time I have to send this email." And I'm like, of course, maybe next time it'll work. But doing these seasonal groups, it means, hey, if this isn't going to work for you this time, that's okay. You don't need to sign up. You can sit this one out. Yeah. And that way you don't have to have this guilt thing about not being able to make it and then sending the awkward email and everybody feels weird. So, hopefully they'll find an opportunity to dip back in when it works with their schedules and that kind of deal. So there's some permission around that too.
Yeah.
So decide on your group's calendar and then decide on group types. And what I mean by that is, what are you thinking about for the makeup of your groups? Are they intergenerational groups? Are they randomly assigned groups? Are they geographically oriented groups where you parse out your city and have people there and there? Is it seasons of life groups? Is it men's and women's groups, or some mixture of all of those things? So decide on your group types. And maybe you say, we're open to any type of group. That's a decision about group types. Or you say, no, we're going to focus on these 2 or 3 types of groups. So for us, as we're thinking about group types, we really value intergenerational community. And so a lot of our groups are, hey, young and old come together. We're going to be a group together. But there are times we acknowledge where people are in a unique season of life, and they need to be with other people in that season of life. So often that's young parents. They just need other young adults to talk to lean on each other. Sometimes it's a business people's group. They need other business people to talk to there, that kind of thing. So we do think in those terms some of the time, but those tend to be our 2 types of groups, sort of intergenerational, anybody can sign up kind of groups. And then sometimes those more homogenous season of life or station of life kind of groups. But I don't know. What about for you guys? What kind of group style do you have?
Yeah, same thing. We have a lot of, we hold that very loosely. Mm-hmm. If somebody has an idea for a group, and even if it's a little outside the box, we just say, as long as you're intentionally talking about Jesus, it can count as a group, but you got to be doing that because people have all sorts of ideas, right? Oh, let's, read poetry, or let's whatever. And that they're passionate about, which is great. You want to lean into that, but you just got to make sure that, for example, we had a couple of times, I want to do a yoga group. I'm like, okay. But I'm going to focus on breathing, and we're going to do it like a Christian meditation. We're going to focus on Jesus. And okay, awesome. Right. So we try to say yes as much as we can and lean into people's passions. Really, our criteria is you got to be intentionally talking about Jesus. Jesus can't just come up casually like in conversation. You have to intentionally be talking about Jesus.
I think that's a good criteria. So when you're thinking about your group type, you're thinking about who are the people that are going to be in it. And then, of course, the content piece is a decision we're going to make too. And I think this is where, I don't know how you guys handle this, but for us, it's kind of like, if you want to start a group, you got to check in with us and get approval to make it a kind of an official thing.
Yeah.
In our life. We don't just say, anybody, put it up on the wall and we'll have all these groups doing all kinds of things.
Correct. It gets vetted.
Yeah, it's a vetting piece of that. And so we really try to think in group types of like, how are we doing at creating a variety of groups, but making sure that we're clear about who are the kinds of people that we're inviting to sign up for this group. So if it's a young mom's Bible study group, this is not for everybody to sign up for, right? And so trying to get clear about what type of group is this. So the seasons of life, it kind of helps us think about that. And then some would just say these are open intergenerational groups, anybody can join. And our community groups right now, our focus in the group, it tends to be get together, have some food, and then study something together. And that's kind of, and we've talked a little bit about our size dynamics, and some of the things that we're trying for is more in the 14 to 18 size range, and it's not a traditional small group, and the sort of the 8 to 12 range. And so we're messing with some things around our group type, but you have a decision to make about group types. Do you have one type of group that you focus on and that's your core strategy, or do you allow for lots of different things? And Tower Hill, you guys have any circle can be a group if there's an intentional focus on Jesus in that circle.
Absolutely.
And for us, there's something similar in that for us, but we kind of have a community focused part of that group that we want to see it connected into. So you got to raise your hand and say, hey, I have an idea. And then we get to vet it with you.
Yeah. And it's a combination of some are Bible studies and some are a little different. Like our worship leader, Dan, he and another member, actually he's an elder, they do a sort of behind the music. So they'll get together, they'll sing worship songs and kind of take requests, and they'll talk about the spiritual meaning behind the song. And what it means when it's, because sometimes in worship songs, there's all sorts of references to scripture that you don't even realize are happening. So they just kind of do a little dive on that, and that's a group.
Yeah. Like the one where the wrath of God is satisfied.
Exactly. Well, actually, that's a great example.
I'm sure. Yeah. Or oceans and different stuff. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So lots of different kind of approaches to your type of group. Like, is it interest groups? Is it seasonal groups? Is it intergenerational groups? And there's a whole variety of approaches, but make something of a decision around that, and that'll help you with your strategy, I think. The third one we've already kind of been poking at, but is decide on group content.
Yeah.
Where are you going to go for groups to get the content they're going to use for Bible studies or group discussions? What's your approach to that? And make a decision. Some churches go with a sermon-based small group. So they say, you're going to hear a sermon on Sundays, and your group is going to have some discussion questions around the sermon conversation, the scripture and the sermon. And that's an approach. That's a decision about content. That some churches make, or maybe there are some groups within your groups that's their approach. And incidentally, nowadays, AI will just give you the discussion questions. So Jason, you can just take that and run with it, right?
But I will say, to that point, if you're a solo pastor, especially, this is a great group for you to lead, because you've already done the work. You've already done the prep in the sermon. And so you could just show up to the group and you could ask and answer and be a resource or whatever, but it doesn't take a whole lot of extra prep. So that might be a nice one to offer.
I think it's a really a helpful one. So I have two versions of that I lead. One is the sermon prep group. So ahead of that, I study a passage with a group of ladies that are, well, now it's men and women, but their average age is probably 75 to 80. I mean, it's like seasoned veterans of the church, but we look ahead 3 weeks ahead at the scripture passages. And then on Sunday mornings, we get there early for a men's group, and I lead us through a Bible study based on the sermon we're about to hear, and we get to talk it out. So a lot of times, some of the stuff that comes up in men's group, I'm like, I have to be careful, but I'm like, hey, in men's group, we also thought, and I'm like, okay, I got to be careful. But you could do that after too. And maybe it's later in the week, you get a group of people together and you already got all that background going. Or it can be something that somebody else leads. So sermon-based stuff or outside resources are a great option too. I know like you guys, I believe you use Right Now Media to kind of generate potential group discussion topics and content, video-based content that people can watch a video and then talk about it. So that's available out there. Say a little more about that if you would, because I think that's a great resource for people. Yeah,
Right Now Media is sort of like Christian Netflix. That's how they build themselves. Not quite as entertaining, but but they have hundreds and hundreds of these video-based studies, and you know, you have some sort of famous or celebrity teachers are doing
Mm-hmm.
some of it and others aren't. But the whole idea is you get really good content. It comes with a study guide and group questions. And it was a way that we started multiplying the number of group leaders we can have. Because if you have a really great leader, but they just aren't confident as a teacher, then you take that content piece out and they can just lead the conversation, and that works really, really well. And so it sort of expands your number of possible leaders, because
you go from leader to facilitator. And
exactly right.
Some groups need more of that in the group. Leadership can be someone who is passionate about teaching a Bible study, or it can be someone who, hey, I can facilitate some discussion around some questions that are provided. So,
and I hear
based or right now,
and some pastors, you know, get a little bristly with the Right Now Media stuff because, oh, well, maybe some of it's theologically a little off from what we believe, or maybe it's a little shallow or whatever. I don't know. Don't shy away from that. I think it's a great opportunity to have a discussion about it, because I'll do that all the time. I'll be like, I won't say who, but I'll be like, you know, we'll be watching a study. And afterwards, I'm like, yeah, I don't totally go there like he does on this topic. In fact, I think what we would say we believe is something like this.
Yeah.
But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, it's probably really good content. And just a couple of points where you might need.
And honestly, one of the biggest challenges in a group's ministry is the content, right? It's like, if you have to create all the content, even sermon-based discussion questions, I mean, AI can give you a great assist with that probably. But if you're having to create that all the time, it's another piece that you have to be creative about and work on and get out and distribute. And there's a lot of mechanisms. So if you can find some other resources where you don't have to reinvent the wheel, that's a huge, huge thing. And I would say, if right now you're looking through there and you're like, I don't know, if I want them doing a study with this person, well, maybe have your groups check in with you and get something of, that's probably one to do. I would avoid that one. So there can be some mutual discernment if you need it, if you feel like you need that filter.
And to that point, that is what we do. They have to tell us first so that we can.
So it's kind of a checking back, kind of with the group style, right? The group type. Well, hey, I want to do a group with, these people. Well, okay. And same with the content. Check in with us, and we're going to make sure and kind of vet it to make sure it's enough in line with our direction.
And I got 2 groups right now that I'm leading. One's like an every other week, and then one's every week for 6 weeks. And all we're doing is we're just reading the Bible and talking about it.
Yeah.
There is no content. We're going through
Those
John.
are my favorite ones, Jason. That's great.
We're just reading and talking about, like, we'll read half a chapter and talk about it.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. Yeah. I have a leadership discussion group. We like a leadership article or a chapter of a book, and then we get together and we talk about it. And some of the time we stay on topic. Most of the time we end up talking about each other's businesses and organizations and leadership challenges, because that's what's relevant. And that article was a kind of a launching point into us complaining about the challenges of leadership, is typically what it comes down to. But there are lots of ways in, right? So on the content, and I would say, you could do a book study. We did one on evangelism with Sam Chan recently. It's a little bit over some people's heads. And so people are like, hey, next time, maybe not aim so high. And but there was some really good stuff in there. And some people really were into it and kind of, they want to go deeper in, right? Others are like, just let's study scripture. Can't we just read the Bible and talk about it? And so we have Sam Chan has some really great questions that we use. There's 10 on his list. I break it down into 5. But the first 2, there's no wrong answer. Yeah. What did you like about this passage? What questions do you have about this passage? There's no wrong answers to those things. And then you kind of drill down a little bit further. So you can train your leaders to facilitate even that kind of discussion, where they don't have to be a trained theologian or a Bible expert to have that conversation. And then we also have some questions from Jim Singleton that are really good about kind of thinking about, what did it say? What did it mean? What does it mean for anybody? What does it mean for a Christian? And then what is God saying to me in light of this passage for what I should do next? And so there's, I think, lots of different tools, but make a decision on how you're going to go about facilitating content. How much freedom are you going to give your groups? How much are they going to need to check in with you? And what's that going to look like? So make a decision about content, and I think that'll set you up for success, and you won't be blindsided by some crazy study that you thought, well, how did this happen? Well, create a little bit of a criteria for how that works. 4th decision has to do with leader training and replication. How are you going to identify and deploy new group leaders. If you're going to grow your groups, you gotta do this piece. And so this is a tough one, because this is where inside of those existing groups, the people who most equipped to lead a new group are probably already in a group, and then you have to somehow rend them out of their group. And so how do you guys do that? How do you guys replicate leadership in groups?
Yeah, it happens organically through the groups themselves. So basically, as the groups happen every time, potential leaders will be identified by the current leader, and they'll just invite them. Hey, and usually it's something like, hey, do you want to teach with me next time?
Yeah.
So it's like a co-teaching. Hey, you enjoy the study? I'm going to do one next fall. Would you teach it with me? And that's how they kind of become leaders. Sometimes they'll stay as a duo for a while. Other times they'll eventually sort of become their own leader. But that's how we do it. And that's how we seem to keep getting ideas and leaders.
Yeah. So then you're asking your current leaders, halfway through the winter study, do you have any potential leaders in your group? Who do you think could be a potential leader that you could invite to co-teach with you, or potentially start another group? And we haven't had too many times where people are like, no, I'm staying with this group and I'm never leaving there. And people get it. They understand if there's this, this heart where, God's at work in their heart and they want to see, flourishing groups, then there might be a reluctant willingness, but then a stepping out in faith to do it. And so there is some honest, hard conversations that have to happen in there sometimes. Like, hey, we need new leaders. Would you be willing to do this? And so we've created some permission for, if you want to stay in your old group and be a part of it and lead another group, and you have the time for that, then we can sort of negotiate a little bit of that, for sure.
And then we train them up. So we have a really good training model, which is, they come in for the training. We have somebody that comes in and does it, and she's a member, but that's her wheelhouse is training. And so we do it every year, and it's a really great.
Do you guys celebrate your leaders at the end of the year, or how do you? Yeah, so it's kind of like like a hey, thank you, and here's what's coming up kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. So, I mean, I think, as your ministry grows, those are the pieces that you'll kind of go, okay, how do we continue to create a great culture for our group? So decide on leader training and replication, and invest in your leaders. Show them that you care, that they're doing what they're doing, and put some effort into saying thank you, but also giving them the tools they need. How do you lead a good discussion? Let's have a conversation about 5 steps to great facilitation and whatever, stuff like that. And then the last one is kind of a 2-part question, but decide on location and childcare.
Yeah.
So where are your groups going to be? Are they at the church? Are they in people's homes? Is it some of both? And who's going to watch the kids? And are kids allowed in a group setting? And how are you going to navigate all that? So Jason's going to tell us the answer to those questions.
Well, we start off by offering, hey, do you need us to provide childcare? Interestingly, we're seeing a trend with young families today where they'd rather go with somebody they know, and so they'd rather take care of their own childcare, which is interesting. Because I know when we were in the young family category, I would take any warm body that was willing to come and do it for me.
Right.
But I think offering it's good. So we have a budget, and we do offer it for any group that we think would need it. Like, for example, if you're doing working moms or whatever the group is, just anticipate, is there a need for childcare? We're at least going to offer. And if it's little kids, we'll try to do something at the church so the kids can utilize the kids area.
That's right.
And be together. But if it's maybe older kids, we do a little different. So,
yeah. Do you have a policy around kids being just running loose inside of a group? I was talking to my sister. Their church is like, we don't want kids in the group setting because we want it to be a great place for discussion and community. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty intense.
We haven't had to put many walls around that because most parents get it. They don't want their kids in the room.
They were like, don't. Right? Well, I say some of the younger generation, they were like, their kids.
You're right. You're right. We see that in church, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're sort of like, hey, there's a fine line between like, we love kids and like, there's a time and a place, right? So
and your kids destroying everything. Yeah.
Right. So some, I don't know, that's a whole tricky thing right there.
Yeah.
But thinking in terms of childcare, what will set your groups up for success? And, for us, Thursday nights is a group at the church where we know we can invite people to come. and there'll be something for kids. And so that's a great time to have groups at the church. Childcare is provided. Or if you're going to meet in a home, you can drop your kids off at the church. There's some things going on for them, and you can go back and have your group. So, because babysitting, it's a lot. I mean, if you 10 weeks of babysitting, that can add up a lot. And some groups might be willing to take it on and whatever. And we haven't really set a clear policy about whether kids are allowed inside of group settings. But when my sister was like, yeah, we don't allow kids to be at group. And I was like, man, that's pretty hardcore. She's like, yeah, but nobody follows the policy or whatever. So, one thing to have is another to enforce it and follow it, right? But I think thinking through how are we going to set people up for success around kids? Because if people are retired, that's it. They're going to figure it out. Or if they're later seasons of life where their high school kids can stay home, they're going to figure it out. But I just remember how hard it was to be in a group when our kids were little, with bedtimes and all the things. And when we had childcare in our house, we could hear the kids crying in the other room, trying to have a discussion. And, it's hard. So that's one way we've tried to solve it. But I think it's a decision for your community to make. How are we going to decide on location? Do we want groups to mostly meet at the church and have things available for kids, or are they home groups or different locations? And kind of thinking through that piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And I would say ours is a mix, and most people prefer, unless they're already good friends, they prefer to meet at the church because there's something a little bit intimidating about going to home, which is so weird, because I would say when we first started 10 years ago, it was different. People would prefer the home because they like the vibe. But
yeah. Well, and there's the whole hosting thing where now the pressure's on to clean your house. And sometimes what I've noticed is there's sort of it can be an escalating one-upsmanship of hosting that becomes like a burden if you rotate it around. But then there's some people who just love being hospitable, or like, come on in, like kind of your man cave group with, like, just, we're going to hang out. This is a great space to do it. And they're kind of easy going in that way. But I think there's something important and valuable about having some groups be in a neutral place like the church, where you don't have to get anything ready. You just show up, and maybe there's a potluck, or maybe there's some food involved, but it's not something where you're having to okay, did we scrub the baseboard tonight before everybody showed up? That kind of deal. So anyway, just a few kind of
good stuff.
I don't know, big picture decision stuff around groups. But I think you and I, in our experience all the way back into youth ministry, college ministry, and the church, if we can get people out of rows into closer community, that's good. It's the Andy Stanley adage, I think, is, circles are better than rows for growing faith. And I think that's a healthy way to look at it. How do we make smaller communities where people can be known and grow together? And so these are some of our approaches, and I don't know, I'm sure there are other things that work well for people out there, but maybe this just gets you thinking about how to be set up for success when it comes to groups in your churches.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage you, if you're in a church and maybe you feel a little bit stuck when it comes to groups, or you're not sure, how do I get more leaders? How do I get, I think these are 5 really great pillars to sort of build on. Like, pick one of them and just be like, this is something that we can be intentional about in the short term. And because this is such a great time of year,
it is
to be thinking about groups. Now, I will say the spring groups can get dicey, because if you have any groups that are going to May is the sneaky busiest month of the year.
That's right.
But I think just starting to set these foundational things will get you ready for fall and winter, which for us, winter is the biggest opportunity that we have.
Same for us. Yeah. And you're looking at this and you go, if you take the S off of groups, then that's us.
Yeah. We have small group.
Yeah. And that's okay. Like, then decide these things around that one group.
Yeah.
And then add another group, and then go from there as the seasons go along. So this is kind of the long game stuff, that you're wanting to be thinking about. But if you create this rhythm and this pattern, I think then you'll see your groups multiplying over time, and they'll start small, like you guys. You had a handful, and then it grew and grew, and now you got however many million people in your groups, and which is awesome, and that's fantastic. And we want to see more people connected in those kinds of relational ways, so we can be relational missional pods. What'd you call them? Relational missional spheres. There you go. Right, where we can be community together, then that grows faith, that then makes an impact. And so anyway, that's what we're after with our groups. And it's a good stuff, Jason. I always like talking shop around just practical nuts and bolts kinds of things. And we're talking guest services and groups. And I'm sure we'll get into some more practical things as we come along here.
Yeah, we just had a fellowship event. We do this once a year where we go to a local Irish pub and we rent the upstairs, and it's just for pure fellowship. So a lot of new folks came this last week to that, and
that's cool.
There's this young couple that showed up. I've seen them at church, late 20s, engaged couple. And I'm like, I really want to get a chance to connect with them tonight. And I was talking to them. I never felt sold in my life when the guy goes, yeah, oh, we love it here and everything. And I love your dad jokes. I never felt more old
Jason,
than I did in that moment.
Love your dad jokes. He looks up to you like a son looks up to a father. That's fantastic. Jokes.
I know. That's very depressing.
Well, they say our best reach 10 years younger, 10 years older. And that, I'll let everybody guess what that means for you and me but
I think maturity can get you a little younger, but anyway.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks for this topic, Jesse. This is a really good one. And anyone, if you want to reach out to us, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. And man, we're rooting for you. We pray that God continues to work in a big way through your ministry and your church, because the world needs it. So as we sign off, ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Take care.